So not every city in the world lasts forever, even really nice ones. It turns out there are a bunch of cities that were once huge and expensive and are now fully abandoned. I decided to figure out what happened. So I like Paris as much as the next guy. It's full of amazing art and architecture, the food is incredible, and if you like cigarette smoke in your face, it's heaven. I kid. But you know who loves it a lot more than me? The people who once developed the abandoned city of Tianducheng, China. Because they basically tried to build a miniature Paris inside China. The idea was it would be a fancy schmancy housing development where Chinese citizens could buy a little slice of Paris to live in. So they literally built mini versions of famous French landmarks, like the Eiffel Tower and the fountain in the Luxembourg Gardens. They even had their own version of the famous street, the Champs-Élysées, only theirs was just the main square. And to be fair, the folks behind the mini Paris, or should we call it Oui Paris, weren't going halfway on this. They made sure little details like having period-accurate architecture were on point. The hope was that 10,000 Chinese citizens would live there, enjoying a French-Chinese hybrid lifestyle. But sadly, it's been a fail, and Tianducheng is basically a ghost town. Some abandoned cities like Tianducheng were aimed more at permanent residents, while others were originally glamorous tourist spots. And when it comes to fallen vacation gems, there's maybe no bigger one than Varosha, Cyprus. Okay, so imagine you were headed to the fanciest of vacation spots. I'm talking like the Seychelles or Lake Como, Italy. You heard all about it from your richest friends who insisted you just had to go there. Early on in the 1970s, Varosha was a prime destination for luxury tourism. The rich and famous would pop over for some time in the sun and to soak up some Cypriot culture and food. Among the celebs known to hit it up were Liz Taylor, Brigitte Bardot, and Richard Burton. Then it all stopped. Of course, it was for a good reason. Turkey invaded Cyprus in 1974 and basically drove everyone out. The residents fled because, they didn't want to be dead. And the Turkish military was like, hey, this resort town would be a great place to hang. And so they did. Since the mid-1970s, Varosha has been bordered by fences and used by the Turkish and UN military forces. Some real estate developers have tried to buy parts of it to maybe turn the clock back and get it glam again, but no luck so far. Speaking of getting glam, you'd look pretty great if you hit that subscribe button, just saying. The Turkish military might have taken over Varosha, but what happens when a city is taken over by an evil movie villain? Well, if you've ever seen the James Bond movie Skyfall, you saw a lot of Hashima Island in Japan. When 007 finds the headquarters of the big baddie, Raul Silva, he realizes it's a full-on ghost city. But audiences were pretty surprised to find out later that it wasn't created with CGI effects. Instead, the producers just headed to a real-life abandoned city, Hashima Island. It's located right off the coast of Nagasaki, and between the late 1800s and the mid-70s, it was full of people. At first, it was an island strictly for mining workers, since there were undersea coal mines there. But it quickly became a functioning and thriving city. Suddenly, this tiny island was bustling with people, culture, and gorgeous architecture. And with 5,000 residents, it was actually the most densely populated place on the planet. AKA, Hashima was poppin'. You'd think they were mining frickin' diamonds there, but more on a place that did that in a bit. Anyway, in 1974, Japan decided to close down the undersea mine there. The country was trying to move on from being a coal-powered nation. So that meant that almost all the jobs on Hashima Island were no longer around. People quickly jumped ship and headed back to other spots in Japan. Hashima soon became a fully abandoned city. Except for pesky Bond villains. A former republic of the Soviet Union, Turkmenistan has been a country since the early 90s, after the USSR fell. And sadly, it ended up under the rule of a, let's say, eccentric dictator. For 15 years, Turkmenistan lived under the regime of a man called Saparmurat Niyazov, but who insisted upon being called Turkmenbashi. And all he asked of the citizens was to be worshipped as if he was a god. Is that so bad? Oh, and he also enacted a number of, if we're being kind, kooky rules, like no beards or gold fillings for cavities. Also, no circuses, and ballet was illegal. And he also changed the names of 2 months to his and his mom's name. So, in retrospect, building the now abandoned city of Ashgabat was maybe among the sanest things he did. His goal was to make it a record-breaking city that would usher in a golden age for the country. and he had a decent start, overseeing the construction of huge skyscrapers. Ashgabat also quickly set the world record for having the most marble buildings at 543 of them, which is apparently a thing they have a record for. Turkmenbashi also made sure it had the largest Ferris wheel in the world, which is kinda odd for a guy who banned circuses, just saying. Ashgabat had its marble, but Kolmanskop, Namibia had diamonds. And a lot of them. Kolmanskop got a turn-of-the-century glow-up when, in 1908, a worker on the Namibian railways stumbled upon diamonds while at work. At the time, the railway construction was overseen by a German company, since at that point, Namibia was a German colony. And of course, they handsomely rewarded the worker for essentially allowing them to reap millions of dollars. I'm kidding, he literally didn't get a dime for his find. But a sudden and intense rush of diamond miners descended on Kolmanskop, and within 4 years it was suddenly a huge town. Not only did it end up with almost 12% of the diamond production in the world, but it became an odd hub of commerce and residences. Things got sticky when the local Herero people revolted against the German rule. The Germans proceeded to kill more than 60,000 Herero and then declared the area a restricted zone. That meant nobody was allowed to mine for diamonds there except a specific company from Berlin. And the Herero people were forced into being laborers. By 1930, the area had pretty much been stripped of all its diamonds. Plus, another area not too far away was discovered and it had all the diamonds they could want. So people started hightailing it out of Kolmanskop. By the early 1950s, it was a ghost town. These days, it's fully abandoned and a reminder of the nastiness of both the diamond trade and the colonization of Africa. In the era of Joseph Stalin's rule, Vorkuta, Russia was used as a labor camp, but just like with many of these now abandoned cities, it had a major boom because of one industry. In this case, it became an uber-successful coal mining town. The city is named for the indigenous people's word, place for bears. But in the mid to late 70s, it got a new nickname, the capital of the world. That's because the coal mining boom, combined with decent paying jobs that provided health benefits, attracted tons of people from all over Central Asia and Eastern Europe. And because of all those people suddenly living there, the town had to keep up. Tons of smaller towns and little villages grew in the Vorkuta area, making the place of bears much more like the place of happy people. But this expansion came to a pretty quick end when the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991. Most of the coal mines closed up, which meant there weren't many jobs around. And when you add to that the fact that the weather report every day in Vorkuta is usually snow with a chance of freezing to death, people weren't psyched to stick around. More than 1 million people have taken off since 1991, leaving only a handful of people who are too cash-strapped to afford to move. So it's essentially been turned into a ghost city. There are hundreds of abandoned apartments all around the city, with some scattered settlements that have people in them. Wittenoom, Australia was also pretty busy in the middle of the 20th century. It was created in 1946 because of its abundance of blue asbestos. And while asbestos is a dirty word these days, back then it was soups valuable. It was used as a building material back then, and Wittenoom suddenly became the new it girl in the blue asbestos world. Within 5 years, it was the biggest town in the region. As more people and companies came in to take advantage of the asbestos in its local gorge, the local economy grew incredibly fast. Of course, this is Australia in the 1950s, so a ton of people isn't actually all that many. But for there and then, the 881 people in Wittenoom made it a virtual metropolis. But things came to a crashing halt in 1996 when the mine was shut down. It was partially because profits had slowed, but mostly because of the dangers of asbestos starting to be discovered. And nothing can take a city from bustling to nothing more than a major health scare. The residents of Wittenoom quickly got the heck out of Dodge, and the city was soon a total ghost town. But it didn't stop there. In 2007, the Australian government officially declared it as an official contaminated site, and they tried to limit access to the area. They also literally took it off of Australian maps. As of 2023, there are no people who live in Wittenoom, and the structures that remain are actually scheduled to be demolished ASAP. So it'll go from a ghost town to, well, just ghosts. Okay, I'm gonna go see if there are any ghost towns in my area that I can check out. Either that or I'll just look at high-res pics from the comfort of my laptop. And if you know of any other expensive cities that are abandoned now, hit up the comments section.